It's July the 6th, 2021, and coming up on this week's episode, Formula One was racing at the Red Bull Ring for the Austrian Grand Prix. We'll have the very latest from what went down. W Series and Formula 3 was also racing on the track that weekend, so we'll take a look at that. Over stateside, Indycar was racing at Mid-Ohio. IMSA was back at Watkins Glen, and for the first time in 65 years, NASCAR was at Road America. All that and a little bit more coming your way this week on this week's episode of This Week. Hello again then folks, welcome back to my office. Not quite an Austrian wildflower meadow, I know, sorry about that. I would love to have taken you outside again, but it's bucketing down with rain in the UK. Will that hold for the British Grand Prix? Time will tell, but as it is the height of British summertime, we can expect nothing other than rain. Thanks for tuning in, thanks for your continued support, your comments and your questions. Please do hit that subscription button, it really does help both me and the channel, and of course hit the notifications bell if you want to know when these things are going live, as I can't seem to decide whether I want to upload on a Monday or a Tuesday at the moment. Anyway, here we are, back on a Tuesday, back from Austria, back from a great couple of weeks at the Red Bull Ring, of course the Austrian Grand Prix taking place at the weekend, and Max Verstappen just imperious, pole, fastest lap, led every lap. It wasn't just domination, it was absolute annihilation, and done in such an assured and serene manner. He is just completely on top of his game at the moment. The same can't quite be said for his teammate, who, you know, had a good run but admitted himself to driving far beneath the level that he expects from himself. He got 2 penalties during the race for running Charles Leclerc off track, something, you know, he later said that wasn't the way that he liked to race at all, wasn't the way that he liked to drive. But I think maybe a small element of frustration kicking in after his race had initially been spoiled by an incident with Lando Norris, for which Lando Norris got a penalty as well. The subject of these penalties, of course, is something that's really sort of dominated the discussion and the narrative since the checkered flag, and actually during the Grand Prix itself on Sunday. And it kind of falls in line with discussions we've had earlier in the year about track limits and, you know, really that requirement for consistency from race to race, track to track, and no matter who's in the stewarding office. The rules are clear. You're not allowed to crowd a driver off the track, whether that's on a straight or in the corner. But the question of when and even if a car's width, full width, needs to be given is seemingly clouded and grey and not clear. So it's not a simple argument, not as simple as it should be. There's a lot of nuance there. Black and white to the letter of the law. There's not a lot the drivers could really say about their penalties because they kind of broke the rules. But there's a big debate going on. It's not over yet, and it won't be over for some time, I'm sure. Whether it's the rules that need changing, their interpretation, how they are upheld, who knows? That's above my pay grade. Anyway, Valtteri Bottas came home second in the Grand Prix to take a much-needed podium. It was much needed on a weekend when his future was once again making all the headlines, because Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes have announced a new deal that will take Lewis through to the end of 2023. So, just the one seat left at Mercedes, and the decision now for Toto Wolff to make between Valtteri and George Russell. He said it is just between them. Hamilton himself was having to push so hard in the race to try to keep on terms with Max Verstappen that he ended up running wide at turn 10, damaging his car, which accounted for, the team believes, a 0.7 second per lap deficit with the damage he did to the car. Ultimately, he finished in fourth, which meant that Lando Norris, after his first front row start of the season, came home on the podium, despite having a penalty for that moment with Sergio Perez. He is having an astonishing season. 3 podiums, in the points at every race, the only driver to be on the podium at every single race, and just doing brilliantly. I'd say probably, alongside Verstappen, unquestionably one of, probably with Verstappen, the driver of the season. Let's just say with Verstappen, the driver of the season in Formula One at the moment. His teammate Daniel Ricciardo still struggling, but did manage to fight through after another poor qualifying to finish in the points, much as he would have done the week before had his car not kind of conked out on him for a few seconds. He's really coming alive in the races. It seems it's the low fuel moments that he's still struggling, but there's a 61-point deficit now for Daniel to Lando, his teammate, and that is not going to be a small thing to overcome. So a lot of work for Daniel still to do. Ferrari had a good race, had a cracking race actually when you think about it. They split their strategies and they actually took the option to not seek to qualify into Q3. They wanted to exit in Q2 because they wanted the free choice of tyres, and that gave them the strategic options for the Grand Prix. It allowed Carlos to start on the hards and finish on the medium, had a great run, and came home 5th with the penalty for Perez. Leclerc finishing in 8th. So a great weekend for Ferrari, and it's flipped that sort of narrative from earlier in the year where they qualified well, didn't race so well. Now the qualifying, they kind of realistic about that, but the race pace has come on in leaps and bounds. AlphaTauri, again, looked wicked fast. Gasly able to keep his nose clean for once and come home in the points. Tsunoda, another good qualifying from him, but a scrappy race. Couldn't get his pit exit nailed and fluffed it both times, resulting in a penalty. So, huge disappointment for him. He just, he does need to calm himself down, does need to bring that consistency in because the car does have pace and can compete. Admittedly, it's better in quali than it is in the race, but some positivity there for AlphaTauri. Huge positivity as well down at Williams, and in particular for George Russell, qualified P9 on merit. Astonishing performance. The race itself, so close to being in the points, denied by Fernando Alonso in the closing laps. Fernando admitting that he was sad that of all the drivers he'd had to overtake for that final point, that it should have been George. And a lovely sign of respect from Fernando after the race, going up and sort of commiserating with George. But Russell doing everything right now. Even with a poor first lap, and that is a part of his racecraft he has to get on top of. He was still very nearly in the points and doing a stellar job. Toto Wolff and George Russell were in deep conversations after the Grand Prix. George is impressing everybody. Silverstone, the next race for Formula One, of course, the British Grand Prix. Mercedes will have upgrades. Lewis Hamilton does not believe, though, that they will be the silver bullet for the silver arrows. They're not going to suddenly make them the fastest team out there. He knows he's still got a massive job ahead of him to fight for this title and wrestle it away from Max Verstappen. Silverstone, of course, will be the first time that Formula One experiments with its sprint race qualifying idea. So really looking forward to seeing how that plays out. Meanwhile, news through this morning that Australia has had to cancel both its Formula One and MotoGP races at Melbourne and Phillip Island. Desperately disappointing. Everyone was really looking forward to getting back to Australia, but of course the COVID restrictions and protocols in the state of Victoria and in Australia have seemingly made it just not viable this year. Formula One has said that it is shaping up alternative options to ensure that its 23 race calendar is fulfilled. Australia itself hopeful of getting the Grand Prix back up and running for 2022. MotoGP has already announced that Portimao will step in for Phillip Island. Well, I've got you here, folks. Don't forget that you can still buy this glorious merchandise from the merch store, and a percentage of every sale goes to charity. That's Every Kid Sports in the States and Street Games in the UK, which are both charities committing to helping underprivileged kids play sports and get all of the benefits that we know you get from playing team sports. Thank you so much for your support on that front, and get yourself some beautiful looking merch as we move on to discuss IndyCar, where Joseph Newgarden finally broke his 2021 curse with victory at Mid-Ohio. Sitting on the pole again, he converted to take the win and Penske's first P1. Can you believe that? First P1 of the season. It's pushed Joseph into 4th place in the driver standings in IndyCar. Championship leader Alex Palou once again on the podium, once again scoring points and extending his championship lead over Patricio O'Ward, who had a weekend of damage limitation where he was only able to finish in 8th. But in 2nd place, and a driver who actually sits 2nd in road course results this year, 5th in the actual driver standings for the season, and yet still somehow and for some reason is flying under everyone's radar, Marcus Ericsson. The Swede having an incredible season, genuinely incredible year, and is flying, could yet, play a part in the championship battle come season's end. Don't count him out. His Ganassi team, of course, with Scott Dixon 3rd in the championship, has 3 drivers in the top 5, one from Penske, one from McLaren. Amazing to think. No one from Andretti in that top 5 in the championship, not having their best of years. Talking about Andretti, theirs is a name which has been mentioned in association with Romain Grosjean and potentially offering him a seat for 2022, either in place of Ryan Hunter-Reay or James Hinchcliffe. So has been reported in the United States by my very good friend Marshall Pruitt over on Racer. So Marshall knows his stuff inside out, and if Marshall's saying it's a possibility, it's a possibility. Penske also apparently sniffing around the services of Monsieur Le Phoenix, who himself is having a stellar first season stateside. After that Mid-Ohio race, there is a Mid-Ohio test in which Tatiana Calderon will get a run out for Foyt before IndyCar retires for its summer break, returning to racing action in August. Now, we've been talking about Ganassi with IndyCar, but in NASCAR, Chip has announced that he is pulling out after 20 years of competition, selling up to Trackhouse Entertainment. He stated in pulling out of NASCAR, he's not pulling out of motorsport. So don't worry, folks. He will continue with his IndyCar commitments, with his IMSA commitments, and with his Extreme E commitments. It's just that with the new generation of cars coming in at 2022, I think he ultimately decided it was as good a juncture as any, that if he was going to make the split, might as well be then. So Ganassi, after 20 years, will no longer be in NASCAR. The Cup Series, meanwhile, was back in action, this time at Road America, as we said at the top, for the first time in 65 years, and Chase Elliott round out the race winner from Christopher Bell and Kyle Busch. And you know what I'm going to tell you next. Denny Hamlin still leads the points standings, but now has only got 6 races to get a win to assure himself a playoff place. We're going to stay stateside now for IMSA and the Watkins Glen 240, which was red flagged when the rain started to fall. It was restarted, and when it became a half-hour shootout, and as always, and as you can expect in IMSA, was absolutely thrilling. Nasser and Durrani ultimately defeating Magnussen of the Kevin variety and Renger van der Zand, but it had been one hell of a scrap as IMSA once again, and as we said, and as it always does, serving up just a feast of tremendous racing for top honours in its top category. It genuinely just never disappoints. In Aussie Supercars, the COVID difficulties which Australia and in particular Victoria are experiencing and which have resulted in, as we reported earlier, the cancellation of the MotoGP and F1 races have also seen Winton's Supercars round being postponed again. A number of Supercars teams are based in Victoria, but a late border reprieve means they should be able to travel to Townsville for the next race this weekend. Townsville may yet end up as a double header this weekend as well, to try to create an extra race just in case, let's say, Winton's race or wherever can't be rescheduled. So all a bit up in the air at the moment for Supercars, but hopefully everyone gets to Townsville and the race goes ahead. In Junior Formulae, W Series again ran in Austria this weekend. Jamie Chadwick dominating with the pole, the fastest lap, and the race win. She now leads the championship standings. In what is an all-Brit top three coming into Silverstone, Chadwick leads, Moore is second, and Alice Powell, who of course had dominated the first weekend, experienced car troubles and never really got the same performance out of it in the second weekend as she had in the first. She's third in the championship as they all go in to their home race. In Formula 3, Helga Vesti and Ralf Schumacher's son David all took wins at the Red Bull Ring in a weekend which saw like 1,000 penalties handed out for track limits violations. I mean, it wasn't 1,000, it felt like 1,000, but you know. Helga leads the championship by 43 points from Vesti, with Caldwell an extra 2 points behind. And in Indy Lights, 2 wins for Kyle Kirkwood puts him on top of the championship from David Malukas, who took 2 third places at Mid-Ohio. And finally, as Formula E gets ready to race in New York, Nico Müller has announced he will vacate his seat in the championship at Dragon to concentrate on the DTM. Joel Eriksson is expected to fill in. And that, folks, is pretty much it for me and for this episode of this week. Thank you so much for tuning in. I do appreciate it. And for all of your comments and your questions. As I said, it is a grey, dreary day in the UK, which hopefully will clear up for the British Grand Prix. Hopefully not if you want a wet race. It is coming up in a couple of weeks' time. I'm going to have a chilled weekend this weekend, and you guys will take care of yourselves. Look after yourselves. Sending much love. Thanks for tuning into the show, and we will see you next week for the next episode of This Week.